Let's press record. Okay. So welcome and thanks so much for joining me this evening. Tonight's session is about the Masters of Science in Counselling Psychology at the University of Calgary. My name is Dr. Shelley Russell Mayhew, and I am a registered psychologist and the program chair for Counselling Psychology in the Workland School of Education. I'm going to go through a number of things just want to emphasize that tonight's session is about the Masters of Science in Counselling Psychology. So if you're here about PhD, we do have a PhD program in counseling psychology as well, but that is not the focus of our discussion this evening. So first, I want to acknowledge, and as we will talk about in a little bit more depth later, that one of the guiding value of our counseling psychology program is social justice. So in that regard, I'm a visitor by any measure on this land and would like to formally acknowledge the people whose ancestors have been here for time immemorial. And as I do that, I would just like to invite you to consider your own relationship with the land and its people. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes Blackfoot Confederacy comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. So here's a bit of an outline of what I'm going to cover in our time together this evening. First, I'll talk a little bit about the program itself in an overview kind of way. And then I'm also going to talk about what is not available in our program. I'll also talk a little bit about the courses, but we will spend most of our time talking about admissions. So the process, the requirements, and some suggestions about the competitiveness. And then I'll leave time at the end for questions. If through all of that I haven't answered something that you need information about, then we'll have time to chat about that in the last part of the session. I also at the end have some useful links that I've put on the last PowerPoint, which again, this will be posted. You'll be able to access it. It will probably be posted on YouTube, but the link to it will be on our main webpage under Counselling Psychology. You just give me a bit of time to do that, but it should be up by next week. If the recording goes well, then it'll be up by next week. So again, if you've just joined us, please keep your cameras off, and we will leave time at the end for questions. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Masters of Science in Counselling Psychology. So I think it's important to create the context. So at the University of Calgary, the Counselling Psychology program is in the Workland School of Education. It's part of the Educational Studies area in psychology. And we have a CPA accredited, so a Canadian Psychological Association accredited PhD program in our counseling psychology area as well. So our MSc program supports a CPA accredited PhD program. Now, information about our Masters of Science in Counselling Psychology can be found in the graduate academic calendar. Now, the graduate academic calendar is probably the most important resource for you because if there are any discrepancies between, let's say, what's on our website and what's in the graduate academic calendar, then the graduate academic calendar always wins. So that's the one that's always updated. We do our best to keep our website as updated as possible, but sometimes there's lingering links and things. So if you ever have a question about what is correct in terms of the information you are getting, the graduate academic calendar is the most important place to go. So it is the official document. Now, in Alberta, and different provinces have different rules, but in Alberta, you can pursue registration as a psychologist after a Master of Science degree. And our Master of Science in Counselling Psychology is a thesis-based master's, and we have a dual focus on research and practice. So our degree has 42 units of coursework, so that equals 13 courses, plus a thesis. Now, part of your coursework is practicum courses, and that will approximate about 500 hours of practicum in total. We have a shorter introductory practicum in the winter term of your first year, and then we have a 2-semester fall and winter practicum in your second year. We follow a scientist practitioner model of training. And as I mentioned earlier, I think one thing that distinguishes our program is that we have social justice as a guiding value. Now, when we look at our graduates from our Masters of Science program, some of our graduates from Masters of Science in Counselling Psych do go on to pursue doctoral studies. Some pursue licensure with the College of Alberta Psychologists, and after doing all of those steps, open private practice or do work in schools, maybe post-secondary institutions, community agencies, hospitals. So there are varying career paths that our Masters of Science graduates take. And as I mentioned, Alberta is one of the provinces where you can pursue registration as a psychologist after the Masters of Science degree. And we make sure that our Masters of Science degree, our coursework, is well aligned with the registration requirements through the College of Alberta Psychologists. Now, here's what's not available in our program. So our program might not be the best fit for every possible student. So if you leave, I'm not going to be upset, but let me just tell you a little bit about what's not available through our program. So we no longer have a course-based degree option. So you might see something called the MC, or Master of Counseling, referred to in lingering places, and it's still on the books because we do have a few students who are completing their Master of Counseling degree. Now, that was a course-based degree option that we used to have, but we actually closed that program in 2018, and we have a few students who are completing their final pieces of that degree. So it still shows up on the books, but we're no longer admitting students. So we do not have a course-based degree option. We also are a full-time program. We do not have a part-time degree completion option. Students in our Masters of Science in Counselling Psychology are full-time students. Now, COVID notwithstanding, we do not have blended instruction. We are an on-campus Masters of Science program. We also do not have a combined Master's PhD option. So some programs, especially, for example, clinical psychology type programs, have sort of an automatic, you go from master's to PhD sort of seamlessly. We consider our Masters of Science in Counselling Psychology a terminal degree, and the application to a PhD in our program is a separate application admission process. So if you're looking for a combined master's PhD option, the Masters of Science is not for you. Now, that said, many of our Masters of Science students do apply and are successful in getting a place in our doctoral program. It's just not an automatic thing that happens like in some clinical psych programs. Let's see. So if you're seeking any of these things, a course-based, a part-time, a blended instruction, or a combined master's PhD option, then you might want to look to other programs that exist in Calgary and beyond. So for example, the University of Calgary School in Applied Child Psychology, which is sort of our sister program in Workland School of Education, they do have a course-based degree option. Now, UCalgary Psychology Department also has the combined master's PhD option that I'm aware of. And then other universities have all these kinds of options if these are the things you're looking for. And the Canadian Counselling and Psychotherapy Association maintains a list of these master's level programs. And I have included that link at the end on the last slide. So if you're looking to kind of search out some other master's level programs, that list is a useful place to start. And I'll include that for you at the end. So just to reemphasize, of course, we think that our Masters of Science program is the best, but we think that what distinguishes that is social justice is our signature value in our program. We have many courses, required courses, that align with our social justice value. For example, we have an Indigenous approaches to therapy, we have career development. So that also, I think, distinguishes our program from other programs. I mean, there are other programs that have social justice as a value as well, but you know, our emphasis on applied research that promotes social justice, I think, makes our program unique. So again, just as a summary, other programs might be a better fit if you're looking for a combined degree, if you're looking for course-based degree option with no thesis, if you're looking to work to do your school part-time, or if you're looking for blended instruction, then our program is probably not the best fit for you. So let's talk a little bit about the courses in our program. So here's a list of courses that all of our students take. You'll notice that the bottom there that there's 2 practicum courses. So as I mentioned, EDPS 647 is about 100 hours of practicum that's taken in the winter semester of your first year. And then we have our larger practicum, which is our second year practicum, which is 6 units over 2 semesters and usually around 400 hours of practice, supervised practice. Now, at the top of the page, you start out talking about theories, conceptualizations, and interventions. That's EDPS 600 and 601, and that's in the fall and winter terms of your first year. And that really does introduce you to and has you thinking about how theories relate to how you might conceptualize how you're going to help people, and also exploring different kinds of interventions and approaches in practice. Then everyone takes also a 609 research design and statistics course. Of course, ethics is very important, and everyone is required to take ethics, and also an assessment course. I believe that's in the winter of your first year. And then sort of one of our signature courses is EDPS 625, and we're really proud of this course, and everybody always wants to teach it. We're in the middle of retitling this course, although it has kind of changed over time, but we're retitling the course to better match what we're actually doing in the course, because cultural influences was sort of, I would say, cutting edge for its time when we started that course a number of years ago. But really, we're moving towards a focus on EDI more broadly, on truth and reconciliation, and on human rights. So we have a title change coming up in the course calendar for that. Of course, because career development is part of what defines counseling psychology, we have a theories in career development. So that's page 1 of the courses that are part of our program. Now, other courses in our program, the first bullet here, you'll see that there's a choice between, after your research design course, which everyone takes, focusing more specifically on qualitative research methodologies or on multivariate design and analysis. Now, normally, not always, but normally, what determines which of these courses you take is dependent on what kind of thesis you're going to do. So you and your supervisor would talk about which course makes the most sense for you in terms of what your hoping to study in your thesis research, and then you choose between 611 and 618 depending on your focus. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes people take 611 because they're interested in understanding qualitative better because maybe they weren't exposed to it so much in their undergrad, but they still want to do more of a quantitative design in their thesis. I mean, that's also possible. That's just up for negotiation between you and your supervisor and what best fits for your learning needs. Now, you'll notice the rest of these bullets. We used to have options for students to choose from, and they're listed there. However, the courses that are not bolded have been suspended. So essentially, everyone will be taking psychological assessment of adults, although what we're trying to do is make that more psychological assessment across the lifespan so that there's not a particular focus on adults or a particular focus on children and youth, but rather that it's psychological assessment more broadly and more generally in EDPS 617. All of our students now take Indigenous approaches to therapy because we've suspended 628. And all of our students take relationship counseling because we've suspended group processes. So by default, the courses that will be taken by incoming students in our program are bolded above because courses have been suspended. And there's lots of reasons for that, but one of the reasons is that we were alternating years that these were offered, and we were not getting enough students in the courses that have been suspended to actually run the course. So that's just for your information. You will see the other courses are still listed because they've been temporarily suspended. They're not yet off the books. So it's important that you know that. All right, so that's an overview. Let's talk about the admission process. I think I have skipped a slide ahead. Yeah. So it's important to note that the deadline for receiving all of your materials, and when I mean all of your materials, I mean your reference letters, your transcripts, everything must be received, must be in our hot little hands by December 1st. So you need to start early. You need to give your referees time to get their reference letters in. Now, in terms of being notified, we aim for mid-February. Sometimes we are not quite as punctual as we'd like to be. Part of the reason is because it's very important for you to note that we receive between 100 and 150 applications for 10 spots, 10 to 12 spots in any given year. So we have a lot of applications to go through, and we make sure that 2 people at least review applications. It's a very diligent review process. So you should hear one way or another by mid-February, but that's not, we're not always exactly on time. We aim for that. Now, the documents we require, and I cannot emphasize this enough, the pre-admission checklist is probably the most important document in terms of us being able to assess your competitiveness for our program. So it's really important that you carefully and thoroughly fill that out. It is the bulk of your application. Now, that pre-admission checklist is intense. It's about 14 or 15 pages long. It takes a long time and some researching and some effort to fill that out properly. It's really important that you start on that soon and fill it out as thoroughly as you possibly can. So we're looking at course equivalence in that. We're looking at previous education, employment volunteer experience, research experience, scholarships. These are all the things that we consider in the application process, and that checklist really is the most important piece of information that you do send us. We also require transcripts. Now, not just from the institution you graduated from or are going to graduate from, but from all post-secondary institutions, we require transcripts. So if you're taking a course or two to fill some deficits from your pre-admission checklist, we require transcripts from those institutions as well. So sometimes it takes a bit of time to collect all those things, so it's important to get that started. We also require a 500-word statement of intent. So why counseling psychology? Why this program specifically? What are your research interests? And who are your potential supervisors? Now, this is pretty important because it makes sense that you would have looked at the supervisors from counseling psychology in the Workland School of Education as people who might be in alignment with your research interests, and you mentioned them in your statement of intent. If there's someone from the psych department, which is in the Faculty of Arts, different faculty, different program, it's important you apply there and not to us. We do not have people from psychology supervising our students. So very occasionally we have our students are supervised by someone in our sister program in the School and Applied Child Psych program, which is part of the Workland School of Education. On occasion, we make special arrangements for that, but certainly we don't have people from psychology supervising our students. Now, it's important to note that if we haven't received, there's also, we require 2 academic references. So it's important that there's someone who can comment on your scholarly potential. So you want those to be professors who have taught you classes. If you've taken an honors thesis, you want one of those references to be from your honors thesis supervisor. That's very important. If it's been a really long time since you've taken your undergrad, you might consider, academics who have helped you with courses. Let's say you're taking a couple of courses to meet some prerequisites. You might want to get a letter from them. There is the option for a third academic reference, for a third reference, which can be someone who can speak to your counseling abilities. Again, that's an optional one, but we do want to see 2 letters of reference from academics, from professors. Let me see if there's anything I wanted to say here that I missed saying. Right. So if you upgrade or take courses to fulfill prereqs, then academics that teach those classes are also a possibility. For sure, if you've done a thesis, you want that one of your letters to be from your thesis supervisor. Now here, applicants whose primary language is not English, international students may have additional documents to supply to prove English language proficiency, and these are important ways in which you can do that. And all of this information is on the Faculty of Graduate Studies website as well. So these are the ways in which you can demonstrate English language proficiency. So in summary, start your pre-admission checklist now. Working on your 500-word statement of intent is important. You'll find once you get started that 500 words is actually not a lot of words. And also make sure that you start filling out your portion of the application so that you can send your referees the link that they need and give them enough time to fill out their reference letters. Yeah, so Alina, this is a good question. Since the online application only allows for 2 references, how do we submit a third reference? I think that I can't see what you see on the application site, but I think there's actually a space for that form for an additional reference. And if there's not, you can attach it to the end of your checklist. But what's most important about that is that you make sure that you have 2 academic references in your application. Okay, so let's talk about admission requirements, and I've put minimum there on purpose. Okay, so these are the minimum requirements. So we'll talk about what's competitive, I think, in the next slide in a moment, but a 4-year undergraduate degree or equivalent with a minimum GPA of 3 over the last 2 years of study. We also need to see 3 units, which equals 1 course in statistics. We also need to see 3 units or 1 course in guidance and counseling and communication skills. Now, the course in our faculty that aligns with this requirement is called EDPS 693.22, which is actually part of our Foundations online program. And you can access this course, which is offered every spring. You can access this course as an open studies student. Many people also take the Athabasca University course, which I think is called Psych 405, which is also considered an equivalent. But essentially, this course must be a course where you are practicing communication skills like micro skills, how to facilitate a conversation, how to ask a question, how to reflect, how to paraphrase, these kinds of things, where in order for the course to be considered an equivalent, there must be an assignment that has been marked that you have demonstrated your skills. So normally that's in the form of a video. Sometimes that can be live, like your instructor comes around and watches you do a conversation, facilitate a conversation. But most often that's normally in the form of you submitting videos, and maybe transcripts as well. So for that course to count, it just needs to include those skills being marked. Now, the other requirements are 24 units in educational psychology or psychology, okay? And of those 24 units, we need senior undergraduate courses in the following 4 areas. We need a senior undergrad course in cognitive psych or learning theory, in social psych, in biological basis of behavior, which is normally something like neuropsych, and psychology of the individual. Now, if you're applying this year, psychology of the individual can include abnormal psychology or personality. In future years, this is going to narrow, and we're going to want to see a developmental psychology course as the course that counts for psychology of the individual. This year, it's broader. We will accept any psychology of the individual. Starting next year, we really want to see a developmental psychology course. So we've been refining our prereqs over the last few years to align with changes in the field and the needs of our program. So these specific things are for people who are applying for a 2023 fall intake. Starting for the next intake, it will only be developmental psychology listed there. So that might help you decide which courses you're going to take if you're looking ahead to apply in the future. Now, the other thing is applicants often have courses in progress. And that's fine. That's totally fine. You'll still be considered. Or if you're currently taking some of the prerequisites to fill in your checklist, you're still considered. But any offer that's made would be conditional on you completing the courses that you say are in progress. So in your checklist, if you're still taking them and you don't have a grade, just put in progress under the grade so that we know that you're working on it. Now, I see a lot of questions in the chat. I'm going to try to get to those, but I'm probably going to wait until after I've got through the slides, if that's okay. And if I miss you, just make sure that you ask in the chat again, okay? We're almost through the formal part of the presentation, so we should have a lot of time for questions. Now, it's important to note that even though I just went through the minimum requirements, meeting the minimum requirements will not guarantee you entry into our program. So for September 2023, we anticipate about 10 spots available, maybe 12, more likely 10, and we will for sure have over 100 applicants. We will probably have closer to 150 applicants for the program. So the question to ask yourself isn't, do I meet the minimum requirements? The question to ask yourself is, am I among the strongest applicants for this program? So the following are some suggestions about how to go beyond the minimum admission requirements to increase the competitiveness of your application. And in some ways, the more of each item, the better. So a higher GPA. These are things that we will be reviewing in the application process. So the average GPA, now again, there's a range, but the average GPA over the last 5 years of people admitted into our program is about 3.76. Now, that doesn't mean if you have a GPA that's lower that you will not get in, but it might mean that some of the other things that we've listed here need to be, you need to have more of, for example, like research experience. Okay. A previous degree in psychology. So we actually don't require that your undergrad degree be psychology because we only require 24 units in psychology. But if we look at our applicants over the last few years, if you have a psychology degree, and particularly a psychology, well, I don't know if actually that's true, but if you have a psychology degree, if your previous degree is in psychology, that also maybe increases your competitiveness. So previous research experience or an honors thesis is also something that improves your chances of being admitted. So an honors thesis for sure is important, but there are other ways to demonstrate previous research experience. For example, RA experience in labs. If you've been an RA for an academic, it's important to get a letter from them to demonstrate your potential for research. So there are multiple ways to do that. Honors thesis is probably the most common way, but there are other ways to demonstrate, or a paid research in a lab, that kind of thing. Previous people helping experience, whether that's work or volunteer, whether that's like individual or community. So for example, being a person who serves their community in whatever way that might be is something that is really important as in a social justice value. So it's not that everyone fits the exact same box, but if you are someone who volunteers or has a position that serves the community in some way, it's important to make sure that you let us know about that in your application. The other thing that can improve your competitiveness is that when you apply, your undergrad degree is already completed. And now this is partly because most of your prereqs will be done, nothing will be in progress. Again, that might slightly improve your competitiveness. That's not to say that if you have a strong application everywhere else that you shouldn't apply, but having all your prereqs done and your undergrad degree complete certainly makes you a stronger candidate. And research interests that align with the counseling psychology faculty. So there are only 10 of us, so we might not have research interests that align with yours. In your letter, you need to find a way to chat with us about how you see your interests aligning with someone from counseling psychology. Again, sometimes we do call on our colleagues in school psych if we have a really strong applicant that wants to take a counseling psych degree but has research interests with someone in school psych. We have made those arrangements, but those are kind of the exception, not the rule. So it's pretty important that you know who the faculty members in counseling psych are, that you've looked at their research interests, and that you found someone that you feel like, oh, like I'm really interested in that area as well. I think I'd really like to work with this person. That also increases your competitiveness in our program. Okay, so here are some useful resources. So our main page, our MSc program info page, this is where the video will eventually be posted as soon as I figure out how to get that downloaded and on YouTube. There'll be a link there. Now I've emphasized that counseling psych faculty members are important potential supervisors for you to have a look at. There's a link there. Once you get into program, it's important to apply for scholarships. Also applying for scholarships in advance never hurts, so you could have a look there. There's a link specifically for international students. And I did talk before about how the CCPA keeps a list of master's level programs. There's a link to that there. So I've put that there for you to have a look at. Now, what I also want to just emphasize is that programs are really competitive. So apply everywhere that you're willing to go to, because our program is highly competitive. We get 10 to 12 spots for 100 to 150 applicants. So it's important to make sure you apply to multiple programs, apply to wherever you're willing to go to. Finally, here's a link to the graduate calendar, which, as I mentioned, is the sort of default. If there's anything that doesn't make sense or there's different information out there, this is where you go to find out what the correct information is. And then here's my contact information. So if you have questions that are not answered today or have not been answered, then you are welcome to contact me by email. So before I shut down the recording, I just want to have a look to see if there are questions that make sense to answer. So yeah, so just to emphasize again, if there are some prerequisites you don't have, or if you're still completing your degree, you will still be considered as an applicant, even if they're not completed. So in your checklist, just put in progress. Let me just see if there are other. Okay, I think I'm going to stop the recording if I can figure out how to do that. And I'll take some of these questions